Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Action for the Soul. This week's Parsha is Parshat Korach. Okay, so, the word Korach, the name Korach, right, is one that some Chachamim say you shouldn't even call this Parsha. You shouldn't even call it Parshat Korach. Call it Parshat ben Levi, call it Parshat ben Kahat, but don't call it Korach, because Korach was an evil guy, right? And we don't want to associate ourselves with evil. And the question that so many of our rabbis ask is, well, why call it Parshat Korach? Call it something else. Call it the Parsha of, call it Ben Levi, call it the Parsha of Datan and Aviram, who are also complicated, or call it the idea of Vayikach, of taking, because that's really the issue here. The Parsha begins like this: Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat, but it doesn't tell me what he's taking. It's a weird thing. Vayikach Korach, what he takes? We have no idea what he takes. He takes all these people with him, and they stand up before Moshe. Let's just try to deconstruct a little bit of what actually happened over here. In order to do that, we got to take a step back. Last week we read about the spies. Okay, there were 12 spies that were sent out. They came back, and 10 of them slandered the land of Israel. 2 of them, Yoshua and Caleb and Yefunah, defend the land of Israel. But part of the argument that this week's Parsha is based on is a little bit of what happened last week. Who wanted to send the spies? Was it Moshe or God?
God himself asked Moshe.
No, so it's unclear. So if you look closer in Parshat Devarim, in Sefer Devarim, which is in the next book, right? It's a review of a lot of things that happened in the book of Bamidbar. And over there it tells us that Moshe asks to send.
Really?
And over here, all God is saying, if you want to send, I sanction it. But it's not, he says, Shlach lecha, send for you. Not for me, I didn't ask you to send. Otherwise God doesn't say send for you. When God makes a command, he says just do it. Shlach. There's no lecha. Right? So he says shlach. So he says the shlach sent. But anyway, so he says he's doing it for him. And now the people see that this is Moses who made this decision for the people, and he was wrong. Horrible, devastating, results as a result of sending these people. What happens now? All the Jews that left Egypt were told for the next 39 years, every night they're going to sleep, they're digging up their grave in the sand, and they're sleeping in their grave every single night. Because for the next 39 years, you're going to die where you are. You're never leaving the Midbar. You're never leaving the desert. So the whole promise of you taking me out of Egypt, Moses, was that you're going to bring me into the Holy Land, the land of flowing of milk and honey. Show me the honey, right? I want to see the land. Where is it? So what ends up happening, there's a little bit of an echo here, so I'm muting all of you. He says, I want to show me. You're not taking us out. So 1 second. I thought up until now that you're taking me out of the land of Egypt into the land of Israel, and the reason why you gave the Leviim and the Kohanim all these special privileges, because when we're in the land of Israel, they're not going to inherit anything. But we're never going to walk into the land of Israel anyway. So really, you have personal interests because you could make decisions that are against God. How do I know that your appointment of Aharon, the brother to a Kohen, right, to the Kohen Gadol, right? How do I know that that was really what God wanted and not what you wanted? So all this dissent, right? Where is it coming from? So now, how does it work in Judaism? Are we allowed to argue with the rabbi? Are we allowed to say, hey, Rabbi, listen, I'm sorry, you said this, but I saw somewhere else, the Gemara, the Mishnah, Halacha, the Ben Ish Chai, Yalkut Yosef, Mishnah Berurah, there's a machloket, so how do we resolve it? Do you say nothing?
No.
Because it makes it very clear that this is a machloket, right? This is the beginning of dissent. And we know that the Midrash tells us that any machloket, Shelo l'shem shamayim eno itkayem. Any machloket, any argument that is not for the sake of heaven or with truest intentions, at the end will not be established. However, a machloket, a disagreement, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, hitkayem, it will be established. Well, what does that mean exactly? How do I know when I'm arguing for personal gain or altruistic, arguments? How do I know which one's which? By the way, we all do this all the time. How many times do we get into fights with our family, with friends, with business partners, community members, because I want to prove my point? I got to show him. I got to teach him the lesson. They got to know next time not to do this again. If your intention is to show that you are right, If your intention was to remove someone from power, right, you're in trouble. It's not l'shem shemayim. Look what it says. It says Vayikumu lifnei Moshe. They stood up before Moshe. Va'anashim ibnei Yisrael chamishim u'matayim. There are 250 Jews that stood up with them. Nesiei Eidah, these were the leaders of the assembly. Kriyei Moed Anshe Shem, these were people that came. These were people of very renowned people. It says Vayikalu el Moshe ve'el Haron, and they gathered together against Moshe and Aaron. Who did all this? Vayikach Korach ben. He took all the people with him. How do you start a rebellion? How do you start an uprising? You know what you do? Dude, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Hey, come here. Let me tell you something. Meaning, once you start getting the people involved, we see this today in social media. Oh, I'm going to take that guy down, and everyone has to know. I'm going to call to everyone's attention. This guy is wrong. Oh, if you really care about the person, you really want to rectify the wrong, send the guy a private message, right? And tell him, hey, these are my issues. Speak to the person. You don't like what the rabbi said? It's okay. Don't get up in the middle of the class and say, Rabbi, you're wrong. If that's what you're trying to do, then all you want to show is that you're a boss. But really, you're a loser. Because it's all about your kavod, it's about your power. It's about what you want from the situation. And that's what Korach did. Korach, by the way, wasn't some guy. You know, Korach was the richest man that ever lived. Okay, you understand? He needed 300 mules to carry out the gold he had from Egypt. Why did he have so much gold? He found Yosef HaTzadik's secret stash. Yosef had a secret stash of money buried in Egypt. Like imagine like the Alibaba's cave with all like the gold. He found it, and he's pulling it out. He had more money than the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all of them together. He had the most, the richest guy that ever lived, ever. Okay? And yet, he wasn't happy. What did he want? He was unhappy that Aharon was appointed Kohen. I want that position. Here's a guy that has. He was a Kohen. He's a Levi, and Aharon is a Levi. They're all from the same family. But what makes Aharon different is that Moshe established him as the Kohen. So, why is he doing that? I am Korach ben Yitzhak ben Kahat, which is older than Amram. Therefore, I should be the Kohen. It has to do with the eldest. Who are all these people that came with, these 250 people that came? These were the firstborns. I understand, again, the firstborn should have the right of priesthood. It was lost, right? But I was willing to surrender it because Moshe, you were the head hadja, but now I'm questioning your authority. So are you allowed to question authority? And the answer is yes. But the question is, how are you doing it? Your father says something, you don't agree. How do you correct him? Are you allowed to correct him? You're allowed to say something to him. You're at the Shabbat table, you're at a table with the family, you're having your whatever it is, and now he says something you disagree with. What do you do? How do you do it? Do you say, oh, Dad, you're wrong? Or do you wait and you pull him to the side and say, Dad, you said that earlier today. Why did you say this? Give him a chance to explain himself. Right? The reason why they questioned Moshe's authority is because they wanted to undo the authority to take power, which doesn't make any sense, because if Moshe didn't have the authority to be the guy that he is, then the whole entire system doesn't work. We say that everything is about Moshe. If you don't believe that Moshe's prophecy was true, if you don't believe that he was the guy that was appointed by God, right? All of Judaism doesn't work. Falls apart, right? So on the one hand, it's all about their power, what they want for themselves, but on the other hand, it's also about undoing everything else around them. This happens all the time. You have some guy who gets into power. He has some kind of like noble mission. He rallies the people around him, okay? Gets everybody pumped up. And it's really not about making America great again, right? It's about doing other things. A whole bunch of hidden agendas. So how do you know if you're doing it the right way? You're doing it the right way when it's not about you being right in front of other people. You're doing it right when you're doing it in a private way. You're doing it right when you're kind of like holding yourself back a little bit, right? It's not about your ego. When your ego gets involved, you destroy yourself. Now, we believe in something called smichot ha-parshiot. We believe that when one parsha is connected with the other one, there's a relationship there. Last week, we ended the parsha reading with the mitzvah tzitzit, right? We ended with Vayomer Shema Moshe, Da'abel b'nei Yisrael matalehem asur lahem tzitzit, right? Make them tzitzit on the four corner garment, right? Al big dehem l'dorteim and al tzitzit connect to the chelet, put the chelet there. Then he says like this. This is the key. V'haya lachem tzitzit, and you shall when you make these tzitzit, uritem, you see them, uzchartem, you remember, at kol mitzvot, you see them, you have to think about all the mitzvot. Then it says, v'lo toturu achrei levavchem, don't explore after your heart, v'achrei enechem, and after your eyes, asher atem zonim achreim, which will cause you to go astray. Right? Now, if you were writing this verse, right, talking about the eyes and the heart and the things that lead you astray, would you write achrei levavchem v'achrei enechem, after your heart and then your eyes? Would you write your eyes and then your heart? It's written in the wrong order. What motivates you? Is it the heart that motivates first, or is it the eyes that motivate first?
The eyes.
Eyes see first, that influences the heart. That's a mistake. It's a mistake. Now, I want to explain this. This is a very deep concept. This month that we're in right now, 2 days ago, was the last 2 days was Rosh Chodesh, the month of Tammuz. Tammuz is the beginning of what we call the 3 weeks, right? The 17th of Tammuz, the destruction of the temple, the beginning of the outer walls, the destruction of the outer walls of the temple, into the Tisha B'Av, the actual destruction of the temple. Now, every single Hebrew month has a different tribe associated with it. And the tribe associated with the month of Tammuz is the month of Reuven. Re'u, Ben. See, I had a son. That's what Leah said. And it also has a different body part that's associated with it. And the month of Tammuz is associated with the eyes, right? Now, the eyes are part of our senses. We have 5 senses, right? What are they? Touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight. Okay? Now, if you think of it like this, every one of your senses happens inside of you. Touch is happening in my hands. Taste is in my mouth. Smell is in my nose. Ears are happening, the experience is happening within me, right? But sight is an experience of depth. It's true that my eyes are seeing, but what I'm really experiencing is this world, this massive world around me, right? Sight is different than all the other experiences that we have. And the reason why it's so tricky is because it allows me to see the world outside of myself. Smell, I know I'm smelling something in the room, but it's my experience of smell. Touch, taste, it's personal, but this is over here. We say seeing is believing, right? There's something about seeing that is uniquely different than any other experience we possibly have. But the problem with sight is that sight is influenced by your heart. And therefore, you and I could look at the same exact thing, right? And walk away with a completely different experience of what we're seeing. Let's look about art for a second. That's the ugliest painting ever. How did that guy, that's beautiful. Wow, where'd you get that? Why did people, now we could hear something and also could be objectively different.
But doesn't that come from experience?
It comes from experience, it comes from, learning, education, and so on and so forth. It comes from curating a certain taste, learning, like how many people start liking wine. You work on, it's an acquired taste, you work on it. You start sipping, you taste the nuances, you develop a sophisticated palate, right? But seeing is different. Like we could all talk about beauty. There's certain objective things that everyone will agree are beautiful, right? But the problem with seeing is that my heart very much influences how I perceive the world. If I decide that I don't like rabbis, right, for whatever reason, no matter what rabbi you put in front of me, I'm not going to like him. Period. They're bad, evil, right? If I decide I don't like whatever it is, right, I'm going to automatically, that decision is going to taint how I experience everything. They say do you know what the difference between an adult and a child is? They say that a child will first look at you and then determine whether or not he likes what you have to say. Right? But an adult, first he wants to hear what you have to say, then he'll determine whether or not he likes you or not, right? Then he'll determine whether he wants to spend time with you. It's different, right? But the heart, really defines everything for us. The motivation of our world, our external experience, okay, that defines everything. Korach was very ambitious. But his heart wanted him to have power. It was all about having everything, right? And he couldn't control himself. And it led down this spirally path. By the way, the thing that actually destroyed him was his wife. He had someone in the background who was whispering in his ear, he's like, you're so beautiful and so handsome and you're so amazing. You should have more. Don't listen to that Moses guy. Don't listen. When you have a friend or a partner who's egging you on, and that's where the motivation is coming from, a negative place, you're finished. You need to find yourself a place that's going to humble yourself. Moses was the most humble man in the world. By the way, how does Moses respond to all of this? All of this. You know what he says? Listen to this. He hears all of this. V'kalu al Moshe ve'Aaron v'yomer lehem, Rav lachem, it's too much for you. Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Everyone's holy. You're going to tell me that Aaron is more holy than you? Than me? He's not. V'yishma Moshe, you know what he says? V'yepol al panav. He falls. Guys, doesn't say anything. Quiet first. Let me just absorb. Are you guys? He doesn't scream and say, "You guys are nuts. You're going to burn." He doesn't do any of that. What does he do? He absorbs the punch. He takes the hit. He says, "What? You guys? You just saw 10 of the greatest miracles ever. You saw the sea split. You saw these armies die in front of you. You heard God give you the Torah. You just watched the spies die. You saw the plagues, and now you're coming to me with this? Are you guys nuts? You crazy? What are you complaining about? You have everything. What are you complaining about?" But he doesn't stay quiet and not say anything. He pauses. He reflects. Next pasuk. Vayidaber el Korach ve'el kol edato. He comes out to them, right? V'yodo Hashem asher lo avet kadosh akriv alav. He says, you should know that, right? It is God who is holy, and He came and He drew us out. Asher yivchar bo yakriv alav, and He's going to choose. He doesn't say, okay, you do it. No. He throws it back at them. You think this is about me? This is not about me. Borei Olam, He chose for us. He made this decision. But you see how the heart influences the eyes. I want, I take. Right? It's a mistake. What's the antidote? Is jealousy ever a good thing? So that's not true, actually. We say that hakina ve'atava, right? Motzi adam min adam, to remove jealousy and lust, right? Remove a man from this world, right? However, we say kinat sofrim tar Torah, right? The jealousy of scholars increases scholarship, increases limud Torah. We know that Hillel and Shamai were two rabbis that always fought with one another, and the Mishnah tells us that their machloket was l'shem Shamai, that their argument, their debating was always for the sake of heaven, because it wasn't about their egos. They knew that they were massive scholars, but their debate was about clarifying truths. Their heart wasn't involved. It was complete cerebral. Oh, 1 + 1 = 2. Are there any scenarios where it doesn't? We could talk about that, and it's not personal, because we are trying to objectively get to truth, which is something all of us should always be working towards. But once your ego gets involved, and once it's about you, you're in trouble. If your job is really to go ahead and clarify a truth, the sofa that came, it'll be established. Don't worry about it. At the end, your point of view will be taken in and it will be understood. But if it's really about your personal gain and interest, if that's all you're thinking about all the time, if there's nothing altruistic about what you're doing, even, by the way, in business, by the way, I see this all the time, when everything is only about you, that person is never happy no matter what they have. Sometimes you got to be thinking about everybody else also. You got to be thinking about the broader. It's got to be selfless. I'm here not just to enrich myself. I'm here to enrich the company. I'm here to make the world a better place. I'm proactively working on how I can use what I have to make everything around me bigger, better, greater. Korach had everything, and at the same time, he had nothing. Crazy. He could have everything the world has to offer, but yet feel empty inside. That emptiness comes from what you feel in your heart. If life is only about taking, it's about having, it's about honor, it's about materialism, that person will never be satiated. It'll end with the following story. There's a famous story about Alexander the Great, greatest conquerors. And you might not know, but he actually hired a team of rabbis as wise men to help him strategize his conquest of parts of Asia and Africa. So there's one story that is told of how he was somewhere in Africa by this river, and he smelled this fragrance, something that he never smelled before, and it was so powerful, so moving, that he just followed it. He followed his nose, right, like in Fruit Loops. And he finally comes to this area, and he gets to this cave. And in this cave, there's a fragrance, this aroma gets more and more intense. And there are bars there, and he says, let me in, let me in, let me in. And an old man comes out and says, you can't come in. This is one of the 7 gates to Gan Eden. You can't get in. He's like, no, I'm not leaving until you let me in. He's like, sorry, you're not going anywhere. He's like, but at least give me something before I leave. Give me something. Let me take some. Let me show this to someone. So this gatekeeper throws out an eyeball and says, this is for you. Take it. So he takes his eyeball, and he's like, what am I supposed to do with an eyeball? Right?
Eyeball?
An eye. Yeah. Takes the eye and brings it to these chachamim and says, rabbis, what? I tells them about this whole thing. I found one of the 7 entrances to Gan Eden, and I have this eyeball. What do I do with this eyeball? They say, you don't get it? He says, no. Take the eyeball and put it on a scale. Put it on the scale, and boom, comes down. He says, now let's take a bag of gold. Let's put it on the scale, and what happens? Nothing. The eyeball is heavier.
Mm-hmm.
They add more gold, more gold, more gold. Nothing's happening. The eye is not moving. They don't understand it. So the rabbi said, now take the eyeball and let's blindfold it. Okay? All of a sudden, right? Our motivation has so much to do with what we see,
100%.
right? And it's endless.
GT.
Endless, endless. We want everything. We want everything. And ambition, by the way, is not a bad thing if it's there to help you become a greater human being. If you're using ambition to make the world a better, greater place. There's a dual-edged sword over here. Should you be ambitious? The answer is yes. You want to kill it. You want to be ambitious as you possibly can. But at the same time, recognize that that ambition can destroy you. So how are you tempering it? You think Moses wasn't ambitious? You don't think Moses, do you know what his greatness was? That he never stopped trying. His ambition never ceased. But his ambition wasn't about power and control and fame. He didn't care about those things. He wasn't interested in those things. He was a completely selfless person, right? When you marry ambition and selflessness, you get true happiness and greatness. The month of Tammuz is about rectifying how we see the world around us. We broke the world because of our ambitions. We broke the world. It doesn't start up here. It starts with our hearts. How do you fix your heart? You fix your heart by working on gratitude. The word is midah, midot, right? What is a midah? If I add salt to my soup, right, it makes it a little better. But if I add the whole entire container into the soup, what happens? It makes it worse, right? Why is this 2 spoons of salt make it better? Why is the cup of salt make it much better, right? Too much. There's a midah, a measure of things. If you're not working on your midot, if you're not working on measuring, tempering your ambition, your desire, if you don't have any ambition, you got to find your ambition. By shanim ein lomdin. And people that are embarrassed and shy, they don't learn, they don't grow. You got to be an animal. You got to be strong. You got to fight every single day. You got to fight. You got to work. You got to pump yourself up. You got to psych yourself up because you want to live a life of excellence. You don't want to live a life of mediocrity. But on the other hand, if excellence is only driven by power and wealth, no, you'll never find happiness. You got to measure yourselves the two. Korach ends up being what? Sucked into the earth. Everyone wants real estate, right? He got it. Right? Everyone wants a piece of real estate. He's got a piece of real estate and he's still stuck there. And they say that if you go over to the area where Korach is stuck, you could hear him saying, Moshe emet v'torato emet. What a mistake he made. Right? Giving up everything. Now, it happens to be his children did teshuvah, right? He wasn't crazy. The thing that leads him, by the way, to this path is that he has a vision of the future, right? He has a vision to the future. I see that my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren are going to have 24 Levim in the Beit Mikdash. Shmuel Hanavi is a descendant, but it's not him. It's his children. Now, it's interesting, and I'll end with this last idea. The Parsha says, V'yikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. And it doesn't say ben Yaakov. So Rashi tells us that Yaakov Bikesh, he says, I don't want to be involved in machloket. Because he and his brother, Esav, are very similar. And both of those names have an ayin in it. Esav and Yaakov have an ayin. That's the only letter they share that's identical. They both see the world. Ayin tov, ayin ra. Good eye, bad eye. Good eye is the eye that's working on the heart. A bad eye is an eye that just takes what he sees. He says, I can't be associated with Korach. Korach's eyes are bad. He's got bad vision. I don't want to be with this. Now look, right? The pasuk says like this: V'yikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat. If you look over there at the pasuk over there, you see the words Yaakov, right? But it's missing an ayin. Korach, kuf, bet, yud, right? But no ayin for Yaakov, right? The ayin is missing because this guy does not have a vision. It's this type of machloket, the lack of sight, that was responsible for destroying our temple. When the temple was destroyed, we were killing each other in the streets. Jews killing Jews. You can't see that you're my brother. I got to help you. I got to provide for you. It's my ambition. It's about me. My heart is ruling, and not my eyes. Right? My eyes are ruling, and not my heart. The heart is not aligned. Your midot are not aligned. You'll destroy yourself just like Korach. I want to end with giving you a bracha. A bracha is that you are able to motivate your heart to see the world in its truest form. Motivate the heart so that it allows you to be ambitious, to accomplish everything you set your heart towards, but recognizing that you need to temper what you see around you, because if you don't, you'll never be satiated, you'll never be happy. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom, and God willing, we'll continue the conversation next week. Thank you so much for participating and listening. Shabbat Shalom.